Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the new album from Robin Thicke, titled Paula. It has been quite the year for Robin Thicke. See, around this time in 2013, Robin Thicke released the album Blurred Lines, an album that would catapult him to the top of the charts with its eponymous single and incite angry think pieces by music journalists for the rest of the year, especially after the controversy at the VMAs. Which really, since Kanye West hijacked the microphone from Taylor Swift in 2009, that was probably the best thing that could have happened to that exercise in pointlessness in years. But putting aside that, lost among the hyperbole and the accusations and the inveterate trolling were a few things that should be discussed here. Most notably, one question should have been recovered from this mess. Was the album any good? Well, it was one of the first reviews that I ever made, and you know what? I do stand by it. I stand by my assertion that the whole Blurred Lines controversy was blown way out of proportion, especially in a year that had songs that also charted on the Billboard Hot 100 that were far worse. I mean, did everyone just forget the Rocco, Rick Ross, and Future collaboration that framed date rape as no big deal, or I don't know, a good deal of Lil Wayne's output in 2013? I'm not gonna reiterate what I've already said about Blurred Lines. But speaking as a feminist, I will say this. There's a big difference between being a misogynist and a moron. And ever since the very beginning of his career, Robin Thicke falls more into the latter category, especially with his lyrics, which frequently fall in the line of being charming and goofy as all hell. And combined with the fact that he never really seemed to have the charisma or the emotional investment in his lyrics and material of, say, a Justin Timberlake or an Usher, it's no surprise that Robin Thicke got hit by a backlash tsunami. And also makes complete sense why he seemed completely clueless as to of why. But this backlash wasn't the only thing that hit Robin Thicke this year, as his wife Paula left him for a slew of complicated reasons, on which none of the gossip websites that I had to visit for researching this review they could remotely come to any sort of agreement. Things I do for this. But what did immediately become apparent was that Robin Thicke was nowhere near as over this relationship as Paula was, because he chose to release a full album of material named after her in an attempt to win her back. Now I'll admit, I had a really bad feeling going into this record. Like it or not, as much as Robin Thicke might see it as a grand romantic gesture, and as much as I might respect the man for showing that real level of vulnerability in his subject matter, look, not many R&B acts can do this sort of album, and even fewer could do it well. But I was definitely curious about it, so I gave Paula a couple of listens. Isn't any good? Oh god, this is exasperating because honestly, this record might have had a chance in hell of actually working as a cohesive album if it wasn't so plainly clear that Robin Thicke was playing this all entirely straight and directing all of it at his ex-wife. Because don't get me wrong, there are moments when they are completely removed from the context of this album that are actually pretty good. But what I and you likely all expected is completely true, because Paula by Robin Thicke, despite some good intentions, is mediocre at best. It's nowhere near the worst record that I've heard this year, or one that I actually find all that offensive, but it's a record that just goes wrong in all the wrong places and plus more. Now, that said, I still do recommend that you listen to it for musical education purposes, because it's a damn near perfect object lesson on how these sort of records can go completely wrong. Because I sincerely believe that there was promise here. This could have worked if done right. Okay, so let's get to the meat of why Paula fails. But first, let's pose a question. Is there a way in today's society that a record like this might be able to work as a plea for a lover to come back? Well, as an example, let's look at, of all things, a Taylor Swift song, one that I actually really like, called Back to December from her third album, Speak Now. It's one of the few Taylor Swift songs that places her in a really vulnerable position, as she begs an ex-boyfriend to give her another chance after she screwed things up. And what I like about the song most is the framing. Taylor Swift knows full well that her desperate plea will likely go completely unanswered, but she's gonna give it one more try regardless. And before going into Paula, I figured that, you know what, if Robin Thicke could sustain that sort of emotion and frame this album properly, he could kind of make it work. And you know what, to be fair, there are moments where it gets close. The one reasonably smart decision that Robin Thicke does make is to give this album a bit of a dramatic arc, starting with a basic heartbroken plea at the very beginning of the album to slowly progressing to something close to acceptance of the separation. And to give him a little bit more credit, you can tell that he's at least trying to paint a nuanced picture here. He puts his own faults and failures plainly on display. He admits that he can be a liar and a cheater, and how the two of them probably aren't right together, and how he tries to own up to some of his mistakes. That's kind of respectable in a certain way. And by the end of the album comes along, you can tell that he's at least somewhat resigned to reality, even if he does still very much carry a torch for her. But here's where things start going wrong immediately, and it starts from what could have been an actually interesting idea. Robin Thicke uses female vocals to represent his ex-wife on certain tracks. Possibly an inspired choice to present both sides of the story or show greater context. In the right act, it could work, but the entire story is still framed entirely around Robin Thicke. Sure, you get songs that get close to it, like Lock the Door, where he makes points about some of his own mistakes that he made, but then you have Whatever I Want, which seems to be set as a freedom anthem for his ex-wife that really comes across as really awkward coming from him. And then there's Black Tar Cloud, a song that tries to describe some of the conflicts in their marriage, but ends up framing his wife as far worse than him in terms of violent outbursts and faking a suicide attempt. Yeah, awkward is right here. Forget awkward, that was uncomfortable. In fact, uncomfortable and awkward are probably the best words to describe the lyrics on this album, because they frequently step into territory that Robin Thicke would have been better off never putting on record. When the album starts off with 6 minutes of Robin Thicke cooing over a Spanish guitar that she's still his fantasy, and then 2 songs later in Still Madly Crazy, which honestly is one of the better songs on this album, at least in my opinion, has the lyric, "I'm so sorry you had to suffer my lack of self-control." Now look, Robin Thicke is not putting forward the best picture of himself here and showing no evidence that he'd actually change. And what's even worse is that Robin Thicke is nowhere close to being subtle. When he tries to go for the sentiment, "Maybe love might come back," he plays it like a brassy Broadway noir showstopper with all manner of references to fresh fruit that might be sexual innuendo, I'm not sure, and lyrics like, "You know cigarettes are bad for you, baby, and so am I." And you know what, if this was intended as a parody, it might be ingenious, but you know what, it's not. It's so sincere, it hurts. A very similar framing problem comes up on Something Bad, probably my favorite song on this album, simply because it's kitschy and silly as all hell, as Robin Thicke tries to embrace his bad boy image. And then you realize he's playing it entirely straight, sincerely thinks that he sounds cool, and it's on an album directed to try to win back his ex-wife, who he lost by being a bad boy. And that's not even touching on songs like New York, a song where Robin Thicke tries to imitate R. Kelly's R&B lyrical delivery and comes across as one of the most embarrassing and borderline offensive songs that he's ever written, or the self-flagellating and utterly abysmal song The Opposite of Me, where he tries to go for a confessional honesty in a borderline white guy with acoustic guitar song that featured lyrics, "All she wants is the opposite of me," where said opposite involved, you know, the action, not just the words. Or the fact that Robin Thicke was plainly never the man that he was supposed to be in order to be with her, and how she should have just accepted his cheating and his lying and his drunken rants and carousing. Okay, no wait. That was the song about how he could never have been the right man for her, except by the end of the album on Forever Love, he makes it clear that she still wants her back. And do you see how many mixed messages I'm getting here? This album might be honest in portraying something of a picture of Robin Thicke, but if this was the record about showing him how he's clearly the right person and that he's worth her coming back to him, he fails completely, because there's no indication that he's changed or he won't do this sort of thing again. In fact, it almost seems to reinforce the ideas that he will and then attempt to weakly justify it as that's just the way he is. And if the instrumentation and the production was better, well, this album wouldn't be good, but it'd be at least marginally more tolerable. The frustrating fact is less that the instrumentation is bad and more that it's just incredibly inconsistent. You're My Fantasy, Still Madly Crazy, Whatever I Want, Black Tar Cloud, and especially Something Bad, they've got some pretty solid grooves and melodies that call back to funk and soul, well-balanced production, and if you turn your brain off and completely forget that this album is about Robin Thicke's ex-wife and trying to win her back, they can be kind of fun outside of that context. But the jazzier tracks, Love Can Grow Back, Tippy Toes and Time of Your Life sound chintzier than your average Seth MacFarlane Family Guy number. Songs like Get Her Back and Too Little Too Late sound incredibly stiff and leaden for the genres that Robin Thicke's trying to step into, and the omnipresent squealing female vocals all over this album might call to mind something of a throwback vibe, but that might not be the best image for Robin Thicke to draw upon, given that history. Now, the biggest example of this is Lock That Door. It seemed to be trying to toe the line between gospel and symphonic vocals of the female vocals, but it has nowhere near the passion or texture in those vocals to effectively pull it off. It just does not work. But you know what? Ultimately, the big problem with this album circles back to Robin Thicke. Because you know what? Say what you want about acts like Eminem or Usher or Drake, who have built their entire careers on airing their dirty laundry. They've got charisma and they're capable enough singers to convey that sort of vulnerability and make those songs convincing. Or hell, take an act like Justin Timberlake, who might not have the greatest emotional range in the world, but has so much charisma and presence and raw cool that he can even make his blatant kiss-off tracks somewhat compelling. I'll give him that. Robin Thicke, though, falls somewhere in the middle, entirely too open with the lyrical subject matter, but a little bit too reserved with his vocal delivery to make it remotely credible. Now, don't get me wrong, I think his voice is pleasant enough, and I like his lower range, but there are very few moments on this album where he comes across as raw, or can actually believe what he's selling, or really delivers the charisma or personality that would be required to save this album, if indeed it even could be saved. In other words, Paula by Robin Thicke is a failure. A failure with interesting ideas, and a few stabs at greater nuance that I can appreciate, but it's let down by a performer who does not bring a lot of vocal expressiveness or the greatest songwriting to the table. I'm sorry, it's true. What's frustrating is that you can tell that Robin Thicke was really trying with this record. There's a lot of effort put in here, but the tonal inconsistencies, the many questionable lyrics, and the only so-so instrumentation and inconsistencies across the board just did not help matters. For me, it's a 4 out of 10. But you know what? It's a fascinating listen, so I do recommend you check it out, if only to see how this sort of failure pans out. It's at least interesting in that regard. But after listening to this album, I can be sure of one thing. After releasing Paula, Robin Thicke, he's gonna be single for a long time. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. If there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or if there's any other albums coming out in 2014, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Coming up on July 10th, I'm going to be reviewing an album from 2013, either one I've already covered as a re-review, or an album that I just missed last time around. So leave your suggestions in the comments, and the one that gets the most comments is the one I'm gonna pick. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.